Psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, doctors of Reddit, what was the most dangerous moment you have lived through while with a patient? Therapist here. This happened to a mentor of mine. He was working in a community clinic in another city. He was getting ready to head out for the day when the secretary pulled him aside, asking him to do an emergency intake for a client who came in claiming to be in crisis. Mentor agrees and heads to the waiting room to call the guy back. Mentor said as soon as he opened the door to the waiting room he had a weird feeling. He brought the guy back to his office and made the decision to sit behind his desk for the intake, something he never does. Mentor asked the client what brought him in. The client screams, "I am San Francis of Assisi and I am destined to die." He rips open his shirt to reveal cuts all over his chest, then pulls out a knife and says, "And you are destined to die too." I honestly don't know how my mentor thought of this, but he immediately slammed his hands on the desk and screamed, "Saint Francis of Assisi. Holy crap. What an honor." This caught the attention of the secretary, who cracked open the door, saw the knife, and called the cops. I guess my mentor spooked the guy, because he took off down the hall and out a back door. The cops had a manhunt on their hands for several hours and eventually found him. Never recovered the knife. The lesson my mentor wanted me to take from this event? Never be afraid to be crazier than your clients. Whoa. This did not go in the direction I was expecting. That was definitely a risky move, D. Yay. But what you got to lose at that point? I would have thought I'm getting shanked anyway. Go for the Hail Mary play. This worked for my mom, who was a psych nurse. She had one patient who I will name Edna. Mom worked the C shift most of the time, and Edna was one of the biggest problems. She would spend the night moaning, "Oh God. Oh God." Not a good situation when you're trying to make sure a bunch of other mental patients get a good night's sleep. One night, Edna was in philo God mode, and my mum really broke protocol. She got on the PA system and announced, "Edna, this is God. It's time to go to sleep." Edna got real quiet. Didn't say a word. Never heard from Edna again. Gestalt therapy, I guess. I love your mom. I did in-home work family therapy. I had a parent who lived in a remote area and sessions usually ended in the early evening. They had some pretty significant mental health issues and had identified me as the primary cause of a lot of their current stressors, communicating with child welfare services, crisis services when there was a risk of harm. One evening they were pretty agitated and started telling me how much they hated me, and to prove it they described the very specific dream they'd had the night before of decapitating me and throwing my body parts into the local river. I immediately left. Of course it was winter and icy and dark, and they screamed at me from their front porch that I couldn't abandon them while I drove off. Honestly, I really believe in the home and community therapeutic model, but one of the main reasons why I left is that it felt inherently unsafe. I worked with women with abusive husbands who absolutely knew I was helping them plan to leave. Parents who knew they were going to lose their children based on the work we did. What I reported. You get a lot of work done sitting at someone's kitchen table, but the trade-off, the safety and security of working in public space. I did in-home family therapy with juvenile ex-offenders. Couldn't agree more. There is no way to safety plan adequately without being in the home regularly. We met 3x a week in the home, and you can get so much more information, but it just isn't safe and there isn't an affordable way to make it safe. I've honestly just blocked out a lot of the sketchy, terrifying situations I was in, because there's no way to really process it when you know you have to go back in 2 days. It's so difficult. Your instinct is to be present with the family in all their chaos and or dysfunction. And then suddenly you're like, oh frick. This is escalating and maybe I'm on my own? My mother-in-law was a family doctor. One night I went to her practice to drive her home and was sitting in the waiting area. The place is emptying out and I'm the only one left. The receptionist goes downstairs to get to coffee cause the last patient is with the doc and she just has to do paperwork when they come out. So I'm all alone when this haggard looking guy wheels in a wheelchair. He wheels over beside me. He's coughing and sounds like and looks like death. Anyways, last patient walks out before the receptionist is back. A few minutes later out comes my mother-in-law and sees this guy. She says immediately, "Mister, please leave." He starts on some crazy mumbling ramble about how he's in so much pain and he can't even walk anymore and a bunch of other it, but I remember explicitly the "I cannot walk anymore" statement. So of course, she says something like, "If you do not leave I'm going to have to call the police." And the freaking guy jumps out of the chair, "Can't walk my ass," and runs at her. Now it wasn't super fast by my standards, at least at the time. I was like a 25-year-old in decent shape then, but he was going to freaking mess her up by what I could tell. Thankfully I was able to get up and sort of semi-tackle him against a wall before he got to her. But Fricker was strong. I couldn't actually believe what I was seeing. He said he couldn't walk and now he could wrestle. It was a bloody miracle. So anyways, Dr. Mother-in-law locked herself in the reception office at Glaston. Apparently this kind of thing happens more than just once, which is scary. Anyhows, she does it and I let the guy go and he didn't seem like he was gonna mess with me, but I think in retrospect I probably should have kept him tackled or whatever in case he had a knife, but I thought I was invincible cause I was young. So I just stand and watch as he swears at her for a while through the glass and starts banging on it. And it was as if I wasn't there. I thought he might come at me or try to hit me, but no, he was just boxing the glass in front of him. The one funny part was the secretary opened the door to come in and saw the guy and spilled her coffee and ran like the devil away. The look on her face was priceless. But lunatic man was oblivious. Maybe like 5 minutes later a couple of cops did show up and weirdly the guy kinda calmed down when they did. They cuffed him and took him away and then we did reports and like an hour later I was able to finally drive her home. But she said the guy just wanted drugs and she saw that a lot. I still thought it was crazy he couldn't walk. Working in the ER one day a guy came in with a fork or some utensil stuck in his leg. I've seen way more crazy it come through so I didn't think twice about it. About 20 seconds later a car comes screaming to a stop just outside the doors and a young lady runs in and yells, "Don't give him pain medication. He did that to himself." Truth is she didn't have to do that because narcotic seekers are always flagged in the system, but it was a great show. Point is, people will do seriously crazy things to get high. Once when I was still in nursing school, I was training on our medical step down floor. We get this guy. I can't even remember what he was originally admitted for, but he claims he can't walk and is in a wheelchair, who at like 0300 develops a left-sided facial droop, slurred speech, and left-sided weakness. Obviously we think he's having a stroke and rush him to CT. As a student, really my only role was as hand holder. So I'm trying to reassure the guy and the whole time he's asking if I can give him something for pain. And I'm like, "Man, if you're having a stroke we can't give you anything that's gonna significantly alter your level of consciousness cause we have to monitor that." In PT friendly words. CT was clear. I go home for the night. Come back the next day and it turns out that after several hours of refusing him knocks, dude gets up and walks out of the hospital. No stroke, no facial droop, no weakness. Just the most convincing facial droop acting I've ever seen. Used to work 911. Had a frequent flyer who we affectionately called Gravel Pit Jim. Jim was crazy, as it and a felon, and lived out of his car at an old gravel pit, hence the name. I can't remember what his deal was, but he checked all the behavioral disorder boxes that started with schizo. A part-time drug addict, he called pretty reliably with the inside scoop on the local dealers. Literally every call I took from this guy stared, so I got this intelligence which would lead to him tattling on his dope man. This was actually pretty useful, and our units learned a lot from his leads. Jim and I got to be somewhat familiar. He'd call the suicide hotline who would aggravate him or simply hang up, and then he'd contact us in a rage. We talked enough that he decided he liked me, and he'd typically call around 11 or midnight, almost on a schedule. I can't say I was ever personal with the guy. He'd talk and I'd listen, but we'd go around for a while and then we'd move on with our nights. I treated him human, if nothing else. If he called and got anybody different, he'd ask for me, and then dutifully wait while I cleared up whatever crisis and got to him. Not friendly, but cordial. He and I did this for around a year. Then one night he drove off a bridge with me on the phone. For whatever reason he decided to come into our jurisdiction. A large bridge led into it, and he aimed for the guardrail. Don't know why. He didn't say anything different or special from what I can remember. He just checked out. I always kinda had the suspicion he was coming to see me. Maybe it was for the best that way. Probably he realized that. He wasn't the first guy who died on my line or even the most graphic, but he was definitely the one I knew the best. Sorry you had to experience this. Still, this story was kinda heartwarming to me, since it seems like you provided a probably lonely man with human contact and kindness, when you probably didn't had to, which is really nice. Sounds rough. Thank you for the work you do. Hope you have the support you deserve.